There's a moment almost every man experiences, but very few ever understand. A room full of people is talking, opinions collide. Someone is trying to sound smarter than everyone else. Another person keeps interrupting, determined to prove his point before anyone else can. The conversation becomes louder, faster, almost competitive. Then something unexpected happens. The quietest man in the room finally speaks. Not for long, not dramatically, just a few calm words. And somehow, the entire atmosphere changes. People stop interrupting. Eyes turn toward him. Even the loudest voices become strangely patient. Nobody announces that he's important. Nobody votes to respect him. Yet the room adjusts around him as if it happened naturally. That should bother you, because almost everything we're taught about confidence says the opposite should happen. We're told respect belongs to the person who speaks first, argues harder, explains more clearly, and constantly proves his intelligence. From school to the workplace, we're rewarded for raising our hand, defending our ideas, and making sure people notice us. So why does reality keep contradicting that lesson? Why does the man who says the least often leave with the greatest influence? The answer has almost nothing to do with silence and almost everything to do with certainty. Most people spend their lives trying to look confident. Very few become emotionally independent. Those are not the same thing. Confidence can be performed. Emotional independence cannot. People can sense the difference long before they understand it. That's why a man can deliver the perfect speech and still leave the room forgettable, while another says only a handful of words and becomes the person everyone remembers on the drive home. The difference isn't communication. It's what those words reveal about the man speaking them. And that's where the real psychology begins.
So what is that difference? It begins with a question that almost nobody realizes they're asking. Every time you walk into a room, have a conversation, or share an opinion, a small part of your mind is quietly searching for an answer. Do these people approve of me? Most men never hear that question consciously. They only feel its effects. It shows up when they explain an opinion nobody challenged, when they apologize for taking up space before anyone complained, when they rush to fill every second of silence because silence feels dangerously close to rejection. The words sound normal, the behavior doesn't look dramatic, but underneath it is something much deeper. Approval has quietly become emotional oxygen, and the moment another person becomes responsible for your emotional oxygen, you've handed them more influence over you than you intended. This is why two men can say exactly the same sentence and receive completely different reactions. One speaks because he has something worth sharing. The other speaks because he's hoping his words will earn acceptance. Most people can't explain the difference. They simply feel it. Human beings are remarkably good at detecting emotional dependency, not because we're mind readers, but because our brains are constantly scanning for subtle signals that reveal confidence, uncertainty, fear, or need. A voice that speeds up, a smile that arrives half a second too early, an unnecessary explanation, a nervous laugh after a perfectly reasonable statement. These tiny behaviors rarely happen by accident. They are emotional fingerprints, quietly revealing what a person is trying to hide. Psychologists often refer to this as emotional leakage. Your internal state finds a way to escape, even when your words are carefully controlled. That's why trying to sound confident usually fails. You can rehearse the perfect sentence. You can memorize powerful body language. You can even lower your voice and slow your pace. But if your emotional state is still asking for approval, people notice the request long before they notice the performance. And that's why genuine respect almost never begins with communication. It begins with emotional stability. Because before people decide whether they believe your words, they're already deciding whether you believe yourself.
Think back to the last time someone challenged you. Maybe it was a coworker questioning your idea during a meeting. Maybe it was a friend making a joke at your expense. Maybe it was someone online disagreeing with something you posted. What happened first? Not what you said. What happened inside you? Did your mind immediately begin collecting evidence to defend yourself? Did you feel an urge to explain your intentions before anyone misunderstood them? Did you start searching for the perfect response that would prove you were right? That reaction happens so quickly that most people mistake it for personality. It isn't. It's biology. Your brain is constantly asking one silent question: am I safe? For thousands of years, rejection from the group could mean isolation, and isolation often meant death. Our ancestors survived because they learned to pay close attention to social approval. That instinct still exists today, even though the modern workplace, a family dinner, or a comment section is nothing like the ancient world. The problem is that your nervous system often can't tell the difference. A simple disagreement can feel like a genuine threat. A delayed text message can feel like rejection. An awkward silence can feel like failure. That's why so many men rush to defend themselves before anyone has actually attacked them. They're not responding to reality. They're responding to a threat their own mind has created. The men who earn quiet respect aren't fearless. They simply recognize that uncomfortable doesn't automatically mean dangerous. That single distinction changes everything. When someone interrupts them, they don't feel an emergency. When someone disagrees, they don't hear an attack on their identity. When a room becomes silent, they don't assume they've failed. Instead, they stay present, and presence is surprisingly rare. Most conversations aren't filled with people listening. They're filled with people preparing their next sentence. That's why the man who truly listens often becomes the one everyone remembers. Not because he speaks less, but because when he finally speaks, people can feel that his words were chosen instead of rushed. That kind of composure can't be faked for very long. It comes from a man who has stopped treating every conversation like a test of his worth. And once that happens, something else begins to change. Something the ancient Stoics understood centuries before modern psychology finally found the words to explain.
The Stoics never believed that strength came from controlling other people. They believed it came from refusing to let other people control you. That sounds simple when you hear it. Living it is something else entirely. Imagine two men walking into the exact same meeting. Both have prepared, both know their material, both care about the outcome. But the moment someone questions them, they become completely different people. The first man hears the criticism and immediately begins defending himself. He explains every decision. He adds details nobody asked for. He keeps talking because silence feels like losing. The second man does something almost invisible. He pauses, not because he doesn't have an answer, because he refuses to let another person's opinion rush his thinking. That tiny pause changes everything. It tells the room something words never could. My emotions are not available for immediate manipulation. Most people don't realize how rare that is. We're living in a world designed to steal reactions. Social media rewards outrage. News rewards fear. Arguments reward speed. Algorithms reward emotion before reflection. The man who reacts instantly feels normal. The man who thinks before reacting stands out. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that another person's behavior belongs to them, while his response belongs to him. That wasn't philosophy for difficult times. It was training for ordinary days. Because ordinary days are where character is built. A sarcastic comment, an impatient customer, a dismissive boss, a friend who forgets to reply, a stranger who misunderstands your intentions. None of these moments seem important on their own, yet each one quietly asks the same question:
who controls your emotional state right now? Most men answer without realizing it. They hand over control one reaction at a time, one defensive explanation, one unnecessary apology, one angry reply, one sleepless night replaying a conversation that everyone else has already forgotten. But the man who earns quiet respect begins answering that question differently. He understands that emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about creating enough space between the feeling and the response that he gets to choose who he becomes in that moment. And once you experience that kind of control, something unexpected starts happening. You stop trying to convince people that you're confident, because confidence is no longer something you're performing. It becomes something other people quietly discover on their own.
This is why the most respected men rarely feel the need to announce their confidence. Real confidence doesn't introduce itself. It reveals itself under pressure. Anyone can appear calm when everything is going well. The real test begins when expectations fall apart. A project you've worked on for months is criticized. Someone takes credit for your idea. A friend misunderstands your intentions. The person you're interested in suddenly becomes distant. These are the moments when people unknowingly reveal who they are. Some immediately begin explaining themselves. Some become defensive. Some chase reassurance. Others become unusually quiet, not because they're hurt, but because they're deciding whether the situation deserves their energy at all. That decision is more powerful than it looks. One of the greatest misunderstandings about silence is that people think it's a communication technique. It isn't. Silence is often the natural result of having nothing to prove. Think about a mountain. It doesn't become taller because people admire it. It doesn't become smaller because people ignore it. Its existence doesn't depend on anyone's opinion. Human beings aren't mountains, of course, but emotionally mature people begin living by a similar principle. Their value isn't negotiated in every conversation. That's why they don't panic when someone disagrees. They don't mistake disagreement for rejection. They don't confuse attention with respect. In fact, many people spend years chasing attention while quietly losing respect at the same time. Attention is easy to attract. Respect is much harder to earn. Attention asks people to look at you. Respect makes people look for you. There's a profound difference. Psychologists have long observed that people instinctively trust those who appear comfortable with uncertainty, not because uncertainty is pleasant, but because remaining composed in uncertainty signals inner stability. Anyone can stay calm when outcomes are guaranteed. The man who remains steady without guarantees communicates something much deeper. He tells the world, without saying a word, "My peace isn't waiting for your permission." And once people sense that, they begin responding to you differently. Not because you've become more important overnight, but because you've stopped asking the room to decide your worth. That's the moment quiet confidence stops being an idea and starts becoming part of your identity.
There's another reason quiet men are often respected, and almost nobody talks about it. Human beings are naturally curious about what they can't immediately explain. When someone constantly explains themselves, every question is answered before it has a chance to exist. Nothing is left for people to wonder about. Nothing is left for them to discover. But a man who speaks with intention instead of urgency creates something rare: space. And the human mind has always been drawn to space. Think about the people you've remembered most throughout your life. It probably wasn't the person who dominated every conversation. It was the one whose words seemed carefully chosen, the one who listened longer than expected, the one who didn't rush to prove they were the smartest person in the room. Why? Because certainty is attractive. Not loud certainty, quiet certainty. the kind that never needs applause to survive. This is why emotionally secure people ask more questions than they answer. They're not trying to impress anyone, they're trying to understand. Ironically, that makes them far more impressive. Most conversations today aren't really conversations. They're two people waiting for their turn to speak. Each person is preparing a response while pretending to listen. But the quiet man does something different. He gives people his full attention, not because he's passive, because he isn't distracted by protecting his own image. That's a powerful form of confidence. When someone feels genuinely heard, they begin trusting you long before they agree with you. Trust always comes before influence, and influence always comes before respect. This is one of the oldest principles of human behavior. People rarely remember every word you said. They remember how they felt in your presence. Did they feel judged? Did they feel interrupted? Did they feel ignored? Or did they feel understood? That emotional memory lasts much longer than the conversation itself. The Stoics understood this in a different way. They believed your character wasn't measured by how well you controlled other people. It was measured by how consistently you controlled yourself. Because the man who masters himself no longer needs to compete for attention. His presence begins speaking before his voice ever does. And once your presence starts communicating for you, people stop measuring you by how much you say. They begin measuring you by the calm you bring into every room you enter.
At this point, you might be thinking, so should I just become quieter? No, that's where many people misunderstand the entire idea. Silence by itself has no power. An insecure man can stay silent because he's afraid. A confident man can speak often because he has something valuable to contribute. The difference has never been the number of words, it's always been the reason behind them. That's why forcing yourself to talk less won't earn respect. Changing what your silence comes from will. Imagine two men sitting through the same conversation. Both are quiet. One is terrified of saying the wrong thing. Every second feels like pressure. He's mentally rehearsing every sentence before it leaves his mouth, hoping nobody notices his anxiety. The other man is just listening. He's curious. He's observing. He's comfortable with the fact that not every silence needs to be filled. From the outside, they look almost identical. Inside, they couldn't be more different. People sense that difference more often than they realize. This is why emotional maturity isn't about controlling your expression. It's about changing the emotional state that creates the expression in the first place. Think about the strongest leaders you've ever worked with. The best ones rarely rushed decisions. When everyone else became emotional, they became more deliberate. When panic spread through the room, they slowed the pace instead of matching it. That behavior isn't accidental. Emotions are contagious, but so is composure. One anxious person can make an entire room feel unstable. One calm person can steady it without saying much at all. That's one of the hidden forms of leadership. You don't always influence people through instructions. Sometimes you influence them simply through the emotional standard you refuse to abandon. And that's exactly why emotionally disciplined men often become the emotional reference point for everyone around them. Not because they're perfect, not because they never feel fear, but because they no longer allow every emotion to become a public performance. The moment you stop broadcasting every internal reaction, people begin paying far more attention to the reactions you choose to show. And that quiet shift changes not only how others see you, but how you begin seeing yourself.
This is where the transformation stops being theoretical and starts becoming practical. You don't become a respected man in one dramatic moment. You become one in hundreds of ordinary moments that nobody else notices. The next time someone interrupts you, don't rush to reclaim the conversation. Finish your thought calmly when the moment naturally returns. You'll discover that confidence doesn't need to compete for airtime. The next time someone disagrees with you, resist the urge to defend every detail of your position. Listen first. Ask one sincere question, then answer only what actually needs answering. Most arguments become exhausting because people respond to imagined attacks instead of the words that were actually spoken. The next time a text goes unanswered, notice what your mind immediately begins inventing. It will probably create stories before it has facts. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe I should explain myself. Pause. Those thoughts are not reality. They're your nervous system trying to eliminate uncertainty as quickly as possible. The strongest people aren't those who never feel uncertainty. They're the ones who refuse to let uncertainty make their decisions. This is the quiet discipline the Stoics practiced every day, not pretending emotions didn't exist, not becoming cold or detached, but refusing to let the first emotion become the final decision. Every pause creates a choice. Every choice builds a habit. Every habit shapes an identity. Eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop walking into rooms wondering whether people will respect you. Instead, you start asking a far better question. Will I respect the way I conduct myself in this room? That single shift changes everything, because your attention is no longer fixed on controlling other people's opinions. It's focused on controlling your own character. Ironically, that's the moment respect begins arriving on its own. Not because you're trying to attract it, but because people naturally trust those who are no longer negotiating their self-worth with every conversation. And once you reach that point, silence stops being a technique you practice. It becomes a reflection of the peace you've already built within yourself.
There's a reason the quiet man is often remembered long after the conversation is over. It isn't because he spoke perfectly. It isn't because he always had the smartest answer. It's because people left feeling something they rarely experience anymore: stability. In a world where almost everyone is reacting, defending, explaining, posting, and performing, emotional steadiness has become surprisingly rare. And whatever is rare naturally attracts attention. But here's the irony. The man who finally earns genuine respect is usually the man who has stopped chasing it. That doesn't mean he becomes indifferent to people. It means his identity no longer depends on their approval. There's an enormous difference between valuing someone's opinion and depending on it. One is healthy, the other quietly controls your life. Think about how many decisions people make simply to avoid temporary discomfort. They stay in conversations they should leave. They say yes when they mean no. They apologize for things that require no apology. They explain boundaries that only needed to be stated once. Not because they're weak, because they're afraid of disappointing someone. But every unnecessary explanation sends the same invisible message: I'm asking for permission to stand by my own decision. Emotionally mature people don't become respected because they're impossible to criticize. They're respected because criticism no longer decides who they are. That's an entirely different kind of strength. It's the kind that can't be borrowed from motivational quotes, expensive clothes, social status, or louder words. It has to be built quietly, one decision at a time, one uncomfortable pause at a time, one conversation where you choose composure over approval, one disagreement where you protect your character instead of your ego. Over time, these moments stop feeling like effort. They become your default. And when that happens, people begin describing you in ways you've never asked for. He's grounded. She never seems rattled. I trust their judgment. Notice something about those compliments. None of them describe talent. They describe emotional stability. And emotional stability is one of the few qualities that earns respect in every culture, every profession, and every stage of life. Because deep down, people are always looking for someone who remains steady when everyone else is being pulled in every direction. Without realizing it, they begin following the person who has already learned how to lead themselves first.
Go back to that meeting one last time. The room was full of intelligent people. Some spoke with confidence. Some spoke with urgency. Some spoke simply because silence made them uncomfortable. And then there was the man who waited. Not because he was calculating, not because he was trying to appear mysterious, but because he had nothing to prove before he spoke. When he finally did, his words carried weight that couldn't have been created by speaking more. They carried the weight of a man who wasn't negotiating his worth with the room. That's the difference most people spend years missing. They believe respect is something other people decide to give. In reality, respect often begins the moment you stop asking for it. Not verbally, emotionally. The moment your peace no longer depends on agreement, your confidence stops looking like confidence. It starts looking like certainty. And certainty is remarkably difficult to ignore. People trust it. People remember it. People naturally move toward it. Not because it's loud, because it feels safe. A man who remains calm under pressure gives everyone around him permission to become calmer too. That's a form of leadership that doesn't require a title. It doesn't require status. It doesn't even require many words. It requires mastery over the one thing most people never truly learn to govern: themselves. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology continues to confirm. Your greatest influence over the world rarely begins with changing other people. It begins with changing the relationship you have with your own thoughts, emotions, and reactions. The quieter you become inside, the less you need to control what's happening outside. And the less you need from the world, the more the world begins to respect your presence. So the next time you're in a meeting, at a family dinner, on a first date, in a difficult conversation, or simply staring at your phone waiting for a reply that hasn't come yet, ask yourself one question before you say another word. Am I speaking to communicate, or am I speaking to be accepted? That single question may change the way you carry yourself for the rest of your life. Because quiet men aren't respected simply because they're quiet. They're respected because their peace isn't for sale. And once your peace is no longer controlled by every room you enter, you don't have to ask people to respect you anymore. Your presence begins doing the talking long before your voice ever does. If this perspective changed the way you see confidence, respect, or even yourself, subscribe to Stoic 95. Every week, we explore timeless Stoic wisdom, modern psychology, and the hidden patterns of human behavior to help you build quiet confidence, emotional discipline, and lasting self-mastery. Until next time, remember, the strongest man in the room is rarely the loudest one. It's the one who no longer needs the room to tell him who he is.